Hey everyone, Rob here from the SnapCast, and as promised in my first league video with Titan Breach, here's a deck tech on it. It's going to be real quick, probably not new information for some of you breachers out there, but for those who are looking at getting into the various Titanshift decks, there are a lot out there. You got Bring to Light, as I've said. You have this Breach Titan list, which is really explosive, and then you have normal like red-green shift. You got Nigh Escape Shift. There's a lot of different ways that you can abuse Valakut and Primeval Titan. This needs to get turned down. And what we got here is the Breach version. So when it comes to Titan Breach, things to know. One, incredibly explosive. As you saw, I had some wonderful turns where I was able to deal anywhere between 18 to 24 damage in one swing. And most of that damage is coming off of landfall triggers, or I should say mountains entering the battlefield of Valakut. Not really landfall, that's slightly different. But with Through the Breach, though, it allows us to run other big, beefy creatures and abuse any mechanics associated with them. Here you can see we have Woodfall Primus and Emrakul, the Aeon's Torn, and we're going to get into those. First, we're going to start with the mana base and just work our way over here. So as you can see, we have 25 lands. And when it comes to Breach decks, this is about the sweet spot where you want to be. 24, you're looking a little too slim. 26, 27, now you have almost too many, and you have a much higher chance of flooding out. Okay, in your land package, you're definitely going to want at least a full play set of Wooded Foothills, and then anywhere between 3 and 4 of a green fetch. And the green fetch is key because that's really going to help you in the Blood Moon matches. Most of our mountains in that are in the form of Stomping Ground, Cinderglade, and of course our basics, but we don't really need to worry about fetching basic mountains all the time. Of course, we're going to have our playset here of Valakut, the Molten Pinnacle. This is a staple here. For those who don't know, Valakut, the Molten Pinnacle, okay, enters battlefield tapped. And whenever a mountain enters the battlefield under your control, if you control at least 5 other mountains, you may have Valakut deal 3 damage to any target, and it taps for red. All right, so this is key. With Escape Shift decks, the rule of thumb is 7. I'll describe that more when I do Escape Shift deck tech. When it comes to this deck, or this deck here with Titan Breach, the rule is you need 4 lands. Okay, with 4 lands in play then, what we can do is, say there are 4 mountain sources. So either it be Stomping Ground, Cinderglade, and a couple other just natural mountains by themselves. Okay. When you Through the Breach and get Primeval Titan in, because we can do it 4 lands, thanks to Simian Spirit God, then Primeval Titan, with his Enter the Battlefield effect, you're going to grab 2 Valakut. And then on the swing, you're going to grab 2 more mountain sources. Okay, and what that's going to do is the other 2 mountains are mountains 5 and 6. When they both enter at the same time, that's going to trigger Valakut, the Molten Pinnacle, for 2 triggers on each for each mountain that comes into play, or however many Valakuts you have. So if you only have 1 Valakut, then it's going to be 2 total. 2 Valakuts, it's going to be 4. Each one of those dealing 3 damage. You can use that to wipe a board if you need to, or you can use it to deal all the damage to the face, maybe kill a Planeswalker, whatever it is you need that to do. So you. Again, potentially, I mean, we can do turn 1, Search for Tomorrow, lead into a turn 3 Primeval Titan. All right. So some of our spells here, we have Summoner's Pact. Summoner's Pact is going to be used to find our green creatures, primarily Primeval Titan, but it could be used to find Woodfall Primus or some of our creatures out of the sideboard. All right. Biggest thing with this when playing on paper, don't forget to pay for your pact. All right. They have different pact tokens out there if you really want to get them. I think I have one nearby. I can't find it. My office is a mess. Maybe. Nope, not there, so I'm not too concerned about it. Yeah, forget it. Anyways, I've lost a game to pacting myself. Many players have, I'm sure, succumbed to the untap upkeep, either breeze through it or realizing they don't have the mana to actually pay for Summoner's Pact. So just be key on that whenever you do cast your Summoner's Pact. So if it is that turn where you are going to Through the Breach and use Summoner's Pact, definitely make sure you have at least 2 green sources mixed in with all of your lands so that you can actually pay for it and you don't lose. Next up, okay, we got 3 Chalice of the Voids. Chalice of the Void is really good because Chalice on 1 shuts off a lot of decks. Okay, it gets out that early hand disruption, takes out a few of the spells in Burn, Infect, Boggles. There's a lot of decks that can just get hosed by it. A lot of cantrips also that are currently being used. And not just control, but as well as like Storm and Phoenix, they're going to get countered. Now, it still does add to their Storm count, and it does add to their Instants and Sorceries cast count when it comes to, say, getting Phoenix back or firing off that Grape Shot. That's fine. But they're not getting the looting effects out of it. They're not getting the cantrip effect. They're not generating that mana out of it, whatever it may be, for 1 mana. There's nothing for 1 mana. I think that, no, there isn't. Anyways, all right. We also have a 1 of Relic of Progenitus, okay? And this is a concession to graveyard decks, okay? We know they're out there. They're in full force. There were quite a few. Dredge and Phoenix, I think, are the reigning champs right now. And, of course, you got KCI still that plays out of the yard. You got Storm that plays out of the yard. So that will help you there. It also helps against Snapcaster decks being in here. And so you can try to keep their graveyard on the low, and then it also acts as a cantrip for us. Card draw is a huge thing that we need when it comes to this deck because we are a 2-card combo. All right. Next, we're going to get into Explore. So I have 3 Explore and 1 Farseek. There's been a lot of debates about 4 Explore, no Farseek, 2 and 2, maybe having more Farseek than others. But again, when it comes to Titan Breach, we care about the card draw. So what we want here is we want to be able to play an additional land and we want to be able to draw a card. And that's exactly what this does. Sadly, it's at sorcery speed. Now, some people may be thinking, hey, you got that like growth spiral coming out in Simic colors when it comes to Ravnica Allegiance. I don't think that's going to be good here because now we have to splash for blue, and that's more mana fixing that we will bind ourselves into. And I'm not really a good fan of trying to do this deck with those. Not with the build that we have here. You would tailor it a different way. There are like Jeskai Breach decks out there. It's more of a control deck than that leads into breaching in Emrakul or whatever it is that they have for their win con. Sakura Tribouter, good old Steve himself. This is a staple when it comes to most of your Valakut decks. If you see a Sakura Tribouter, you could almost guarantee your opponent is playing Valakut in his 75. And the great thing about Sakura Tribouter, it is a 2-drop. It allows you to get a basic land. Okay, generally you're going to use that, just to pull a mountain, but you may need it to get your basic forest too if you need to, say, avoid Blood Moon, because we can easily get locked out with the Blood Moon with this deck. And he also acts as a good blocker. And the play with this, for those who don't know, okay, you can declare him as a blocker. And then, before damage is dealt, you can sacrifice him, get the land. The creature that he blocked, if it doesn't have trample, will deal 0 damage to you then. So it's a free block, and you still get to use Sakura Tribouter for what he needs. Also, again, just another excellent mana ramp. Search for Tomorrow is probably one of the best mana ramps we have. Almost always, I would say you want to play this on turn 1, unless you know your opponent is doing something with a whole bunch of 1-drops, and you want to get Chalice down, and you have the ability to cast Chalice on turn 1. So with this one, it's a Suspend 2 for 1 green, and we're going to be able to search for a basic land and put it on the battlefield, okay, not tapped. So at the beginning of turn 3, if you get this off on 1, you should be looking at this being your 4th land as long as you don't miss any land drops. Sakura Tribouter or Explorer could be land number 5. So you're already looking at naturally 5 lands at that point. And then from there, it's just, you'll be able to cash her through the breach. You'll be able to get Primeval Titan out, Woodfall Primus, Emrakul, whatever it may be. Simian Spirit Guide, mainly we use this for mana acceleration. If you really need to, you can cast it and use it as a creature for blockers, but generally we're going to be exiling this. Again, the key plays here is exiling Simian Spirit Guide to be able to cast Chalice of the Void on 1, or to be able to cash her through the breach with only 4 mana in play. So the creature base then that we really have that we want to abuse. Primeval Titan we've already covered, his ability to grab lands, 6/6 with trample, wonderful creature to have. Woodfall Primus, when it comes to through the breach decks, Woodfall Primus is phenomenal. All right, when he enters the battlefield, you destroy a target non-creature permanent. Planeswalkers, artifacts, land. You can really screw your 3-color opponent by taking them off that 1-color source that they need. And then he has Persist. So with Through the Breach, at the beginning of the next end step, you have to sacrifice that creature. So generally, okay, we get Primeval Titan for 1 attack, and then we have to sacrifice him. Well, when it comes to Woodfall Primus, he has a wonderful mechanic called Persist. And that is when this creature dies, if it has 0+1+ or -1/-1 counters on it, return it to the battlefield under its owner's control with a -1/-1 counter on it. So it comes in as a 6/6 with trample and haste, thanks to Through the Breach. Then at the beginning of the next end step, you'll sacrifice it, Persist, and we'll check. There were no -1/-1 counters on it. It'll re-enter the battlefield with 1 -1/-1 counter, and you get to destroy another target non-creature permanent. Don't forget that. That cost me a game one time when I was playing it in paper. I brought it back. I'd gotten lazy with my triggers because sometimes playing a lot of Magic Online, it happens. Okay, we're used to being prompted on Magic Online, hey, let's go ahead and remind you to pay for your pack, or hey, don't forget that you have this trigger on the stack. So if you're playing it on paper, be very keen on what every card you have does, regardless of round 1 through 15, game 1 through 3. Always read the card, always take your time, make those checks, okay, because you don't want to screw up and miss something like this. Emrakul, the Aeon's Torrent, is a wonderful Through the Breach creature. And really, in your super long matchups, you may actually even be able to hard cast it. Turns out it can't be countered. And whenever you cast, if you do get to cast Emrakul the Aeon's Torrent, you take an extra turn after this one. It has flying, protection from colored spells, and Annihilator 6. So whenever it's declared attacking, then your opponent has to sacrifice 6 permanents, and he's a 15/15. Another great thing about Emrakul the Aeon's Torrent is blue-black mill. I've faced it, I think, 3 times now across the 5 different leagues I've played. He's wonderful for it, or she's wonderful for it. Goes to the yard, and then I get to reshuffle my entire graveyard back into the library. So Emrakul goes back. Even at the end of Through the Breach, when I have to sacrifice it, my entire graveyard gets reshuffled in. So if I need more spells, things have been ripped from my hand, or anything like that, I can definitely utilize that. I wish there were other ways for me to get it in, but I think the 70 or the 60 is just too clean for me to try to work in like a Faithless Looting or something along those lines. Some little tricks here too. Actually, we'll go over those after I cover the sideboard. So the sideboard, we've got 2 Anger of the Gods. Anger of the Gods, this is great for your low creature decks. Humans, spirits, anything that can just, go incredibly wide and try to sweep you out. I have a couple games against Paul Mahler. At least I think it's Paul Mahler. It's P. Mahler on Magic Online. And he likes to run Mono Red Prison. And he goes super wide with his goblins. And being able to hit a Anger of the Gods is fantastic. Ancient Grudge here. This is great for Artifact Hate. It does have flashback of being able to just be cast for 1 force. And again, it's instant speed removal for artifacts. Aether Vials. Not really Damping Spheres, but cards that can really prevent you from executing your game. Ensnaring Bridge is another great target for it. Chalice of the Void on 2. We can go on. Reclamation Sage, wonderful elf here. Whenever she enters the battlefield, we're able to destroy target artifact or enchantment. This is great for Blood Moons, so if you do suspect a moon deck, you definitely want to bring her in, and you're going to want to keep Woodfall Primus in as well. And the great thing about Reclamation Sage too is she is pactable. You can search for her with Summoner's Pact with it being a green creature. It also destroys an artifact. 2 Obstinate Baloths. This is great for discard decks. So your black-green X decks. This is wonderful to bring in anything that's going to cause you to discard cards as well. So if you run into Pox or whatever it may be, anything with Lily of the Veil also is very good. And what's great with this and Thoughtseize is that, say you have Simian Spirit Guide and Obstinate Baloth in hand. Okay, what you can choose to do is you can just choose to exile Simian Spirit Guide, generate 1 red, have it float, and then they have to pull Obstinate Baloth from hand. Because Thoughtseize does not give them the out of you may, it is you will. So you get a free creature, you get to gain 4 life. It's awesome to have. Carnage Tyrant, this is for control matchups here, can't be countered, has trample and hexproof. Also good target for decks with heavy targeted removal. Being able to cast this and keeping them on the field is wonderful. And it's a really big body too, so it's going to take quite a few creatures in order to kill it. And I'm willing to make that trade too, depending on the matchup. Hornet Queen, this is another good one, especially if they have a lot of flyers and they like to go wide. Hornet Queen enters battlefield, you get 4 1/1 green insect creature tokens with flying and death touch. So no matter what they block, as long as they deal the damage, that creature is going to die. Ruach Thar, I posted a comment in our one group about Ruach Thar and my Storm opponent having to read it. So Ruach Thar the Unbowed, it has Vigilance and Reach, great. I really don't care too much about that. It is nice to have a 6/6 that doesn't tap when I attack with it. He attacks every turn if able, but the biggest thing here is whenever a player casts a non-creature spell, Ruach Thar deals 6 damage to that player. And the Storm opponent really didn't know how to play around that. Definitely took a while to read it. And it's one of those good hosers there. It's good for KCI as well, Grixis War, any of those decks that just want to play a bunch of spells and have you sit back and just wait. Ruach Thar is wonderful. Damping Sphere, this is definitely good for your Amulet matchups. This is good for your Tron matchups, just anything where they want to make more mana than what 1 land should normally produce. This is good. And then also it hurts them on casting multiple spells per turn. So that's where you can hit like your Storm opponent or just, again, KCI, because now they have to generate even more mana and account for it, and it gets to a point where they just can't storm up to where they do their infinite damage that they need to kill you. Relic of Progenitus, just having an extra one in the sideboard to bring in. And then 2 Grafdigger's Cage. So my local meta, I've ran into a lot of Coco, I've ran into a lot of like spirits and that's why I have 2 Grabdigger's Cage here on the side as well. There is room in the sideboard for manipulation, changing a few cards out here or there, but for the most part, I think a lot of it is just stapled in, those being the Baloths, the Ruach Thar, the Carnage Tyrant, Anger of the Gods, Ancient Grudges, and definitely I would say the Relic and Damping Sphere. Based on your meta, of course, you're going to change this to the way that seems best for you. So, some little tricks that you can do with this. Remember, Relic of Progenitus doesn't need to tap whenever you exile it for card draw, so you can always use it as an end-of-turn cantrip to get the most efficient use out of your mana. As I discussed in my video, whenever you're fetching early, you want to get your Cinder Blades out of your deck because those are going to enter tapped unless you have 2 basics in play already. Once you have 2 basic lands in play, then you can change that over to starting to fetch for your Stomping Ground, so then you don't have to shock yourself whenever you draw into that Stomping Ground, especially if you need to use that mana early and often. If you suspect Blood Moon, this is kind of a no-brainer here, but get your force on the field as quickly as possible. You do have enough force in here to be able to cast Prime Time. You don't have enough force to be able to cast Woodfall Primus. Turn 1 with Chalice of the Void. Again, Simian Spirit Guide and 1 mana gets Chalice on 1. It's always a great thing to do. Through the Breach. Okay, if you cast Through the Breach on your opponent's end step, you're able to keep your creature throughout your turn then. Yeah, that's a wonderful thing. It's a nice little kind of gotcha moment, especially if you have 2 Through the Breaches in hand and you're going against a control player, you can bait out the early counter there. So then they have to act now or they will act later. And of course, you know, depending on what the counter magic is that they have, they may just let it resolve anyways because they might have Cryptic Command to where they can just bounce the creature back to your hand and you may be out of luck. Who knows how they want to deal with it, but that's the thing. Also, always try to bait out counter if you can. I was had a couple matches where I was able to bait out counter spells. Casting Summoner's Pact, okay, and they have a counter non-creature, and they only have enough mana to cast 1. They're probably going to counter the Summoner's Pact because they can't counter then a Primeval Titan, especially if you have enough mana to hard cast it. So broadcasting different things like that or being able to feign different ways like that is always a good thing there. Obstinate Baloth, I talked a little bit about the plays you can do with Obstinate Baloth. And when it comes to Damping Sphere, big thing to keep an eye out for is your Summoner's Pact is a spell. It will go against you. So if you have Damping Sphere in play and you cast Summoner's Pact and then you want to Through the Breach or you want to cast Prime Time, it's going to cost 1 more mana. So your Through the Breaches are 6, your Prime Time is now 7. But that's all I really have when it comes to this deck. It is a wonderful deck to play. Multiple ways that you can get in with dealing damage. If you want to see some good sideboarding guides, 18damage.com. There's a link down below for that. You can give it a look, and all of us Valakut players, we've gotten together and we've helped build this website, provide our inputs to it, and we continue to try to keep it updated as often as possible. If you like all this content and you want to see more, again, just hit that like, subscribe button down below. We're going to be doing more leagues. We're going to be doing more deck techs, all that wonderful stuff. And yeah, that's really it for me here. Thanks again, guys, for joining me here in my office. And we'll be back with more league play, not just on Breach Titan, but also on Titanshift itself. Y'all have a fantastic evening. And remember, keep grinding. You're only going to get better.